Commissioner, I call Ms Donna McKenna.
Ms McKenna, would you prefer to be sworn or to make an affirmation?
An affirmation, please.
Do you mind standing then, please?
Repeat after me. I solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Ms McKenna. Do sit down.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms Orr.
Ms McKenna, could you please state your full name?
Donna Sarah McKenna.
And you live at an address in New South Wales that's known to the Commission?
That's correct.
And you are a Commissioner with the FairWork Commission?
That is correct.
You've made a statement to the Royal Commission?
I have.
Is that statement dated the 17th of April 2018?
It is.
I'm sorry, that's my mistake.
I beg your pardon?
It's dated the 16th of April 2018. Have you read that statement, Ms McKenna?
I have.
Are the contents of that statement true and correct?
To the best of my knowledge.
I tender that statement, Commissioner.
Exhibit 2.197, the statement of Ms McKenna dated 16 April 18.
Did you receive a summons to attend at the Commission today, Ms McKenna?
I received it prior to today.
Yes. It's a summons requiring you to attend today?
Yes.
You have that summons there?
I do.
I tender that summons, Commissioner.
Exhibit 2.198 is the summons to Ms McKenna.
Ms McKenna, in late 2016, did you decide to seek financial advice?
I did.
And why did you decide to seek financial advice?
There were two principal reasons. First of all, there had been a lot of publicity about the impending changes from 1 July 2017. And secondly, I had been liaising with a local loan broker in relation to securing a home equity loan over the value of my home. And I was thinking of potentially buying property and or assisting my children with that loan.
And when you referred to the impending changes there, were you referring to impending taxation changes in relation to superannuation funds?
Among other matters, yes.
Yes, thank you. And who did you decide to seek financial advice from?
Henderson Maxwell.
And why did you decide to approach Henderson Maxwell?
I had seen Sam Henderson on television. He had a program on Sky Business Channel. I had also read pieces that he had written in publications such as the Australian Financial Review, as well as other publications such as Money Magazine and the like.
And having decided to seek financial advice from Henderson Maxwell, did you contact that firm by phone on the 3rd of November 2016?
Yes, I did.
And did you speak with a female employee of the firm?
Yes, I did.
And did you answer some questions put to you by the female employee about your financial situation and the reasons why you were seeking financial advice?
Yes, in short form.
And later that day, did you receive a telephone call from Mr. Sam Henderson?
It was fairly shortly thereafter.
Yes. And did you tell Mr. Henderson why you were seeking financial advice?
Yes, I went over some of the matters that I've alluded to in my evidence.
What did you tell him about why you were seeking financial advice?
That the changes were coming up from 1 July and that I had a substantial amount of money in superannuation, and so I considered that I needed to seek some advice in relation to that matter. I also informed Mr. Henderson, again in short form, that I had acquired this pre-approval for a loan and that I was considering using it in relation to property.
Thank you. And did Mr. Henderson tell you that you would receive an electronic questionnaire in which you could include some information about your financial position?
He said he would like me to complete an electronic questionnaire. I said I don't particularly like doing those sorts of things online. But yes, then I was informed that an electronic questionnaire would be sent. And I said I could only put in general information.
And what did Mr Henderson say in response to you saying that you could only put general information into that electronic questionnaire?
Well, in relation to the matter of expenses, for example, I said to Mr Henderson that I'd been to see a Commonwealth financial planner some years earlier for a preliminary interview, and that I had been given a questionnaire that had many pages of information being sought in relation to the detail of expenditure on groceries, utilities and matters of that nature. I said I wasn't at a point in my life where I was budgeting for those types of matters or monitoring those types of expenses. And he said, well, you can just put in anything. And I said, well, what should I put in? And he said, put in $1,000 a week.
And did Mr Henderson arrange in this telephone call for you to meet with him at his office a few days later?
We did make arrangements for a further meeting, for our first meeting.
And after that call, did you then receive an email with a link to the electronic questionnaire?
I did.
And did you complete the electronic questionnaire?
I did complete it. Well, that's not quite correct. I completed parts of it. It was one of those smart form type questionnaires, and so I filled in the parts where an answer was required mostly and didn't provide information where it was not required.
And having completed that questionnaire online, or the parts of the questionnaire online, did you then receive an email from Henderson Maxwell attaching a PDF copy of the questionnaire with your answers in it?
Yes.
And you have annexed that PDF document that you received from Henderson Maxwell as the first exhibit to your statement?
I have, but I should point out that the questionnaire as returned to me contained additional information, such as the charts.
Yes, I see. Perhaps I can ask you some questions about that. So if we could bring up FPA 0011 0002 0077. This is the PDF form that you received from Henderson Maxwell.
This is the
Yes.
PDF document that I received in return, yes.
And if we turn to 0081, we see that the document records your goals and objectives.
Yes.
And perhaps we can zoom in on that to see that what's recorded there is that you wanted to maximise use of assets, equity in home, superannuation, saving and income through investments and in a tax effective way, pending retirement in, words appear to be cut off. Can you remember what words you entered into the form there, Ms. McKenna?
To the best of my recollection, it was pending a retirement in approximately 9 years.
Thank you. And a second goal that was listed was to assist my adult children, details of those children have been redacted, to assist my adult children financially, for example, in property and investment.
Yes.
So these were the goals and objectives that you entered into the electronic questionnaire.
That's correct.
And if we turn to 0082, we see a heading for expenses and that there is a reference to current living expenses of $1,000. That's the figure that you entered in following your conversation with Mr Henderson about that matter.
882, did you say? 0082, did you say?
Yes, towards the bottom of the page.
Thank you, yes. Indeed.
Yes, so that's the $1,000 that you entered into the form following that conversation with Mr Henderson.
That is correct.
And then if we turn to 0084, we see that you've entered information in the electronic questionnaire about 2 superannuation funds.
That is correct.
And the amounts are redacted, but you included information about the account numbers and the balance of each of those superannuation funds.
Yes, the balances were drawn from my most recent statements for each fund.
Thank you. And the 2 superannuation funds were the SAS Deferred Superannuation Fund and the PSAP Superannuation Fund.
Yes.
these were both public sector related super funds?
Public sector related.
Yes, and the SAS Deferred Superannuation Fund was a fund that you were no longer making contributions to,
That is correct.
and the PSAP fund was the fund you were currently making contributions to.
That is correct.
And at 0084, we see that you've also included information about your insurance situation,
Correct.
and that you entered information in the electronic questionnaire about private health insurance, life insurance, income protection insurance, and total and permanent disability insurance.
That is correct.
And the life, income protection and TPD insurance were all part of your PSAP super fund.
Correct.
And underneath that, you answered a question about whether you required more advice and assistance to secure your financial future for you and or your family in the event of serious illness, accident or death. And you answered that question no.
That's correct.
You were not seeking advice about insurance?
I was not.
Okay. And then if we turn to 0087, we see that the answers that you gave throughout the form contributed to a risk profile that was calculated.
That is correct.
And if we pan out slightly, we'll see towards the bottom risk profile summary. So your answers generated a risk profile score of 28 and a risk profile of conservative.
That is what is recorded.
Yes, so is this an example of a piece of information that was not part of the information that you put into the form, but which you understand was calculated by reference to the information you included in the form?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, having received this PDF of this questionnaire by email, did you then meet with Mr Henderson on the 7th of November 2016?
I did.
And that meeting was at his office?
At the Henderson Maxwell offices.
Yes. And in this meeting, you told Mr Henderson that you intended to retire in about 9 years?
Yes.
And you discussed your potential plan to purchase a property with the pre-approved loan that you've referred to?
That's correct.
Did you discuss what should be done with your superannuation prior to the impending changes in the laws that you've referred to?
Yes, because of the superannuation amounts that I had or were pending, I thought it particularly important to seek advice before those changes came into effect. I had some money on hand, and I didn't know whether I should put that towards superannuation before the changes, and I also inquired as to transition to retirement arrangements and whether anything needed to be done before the changes from 1 July 2017.
And did you discuss your desire to assist your children financially?
Yes, that's very important to me.
And did you give Mr Henderson information about your remuneration package?
I did.
Did you give him information about the approximate balance you had in each of your 2 superannuation funds?
I did, based on the information in the most recent statements.
And did you also discuss with Mr Henderson the value of your home?
I did.
Did you tell him about shares that you had in Medibank and what they were worth?
I did, in approximate terms.
Yes, and you told him about the value of the pre-approved loan?
I did.
Did Mr Henderson ask you about insurance?
He said, do you have insurance? And I indicated I did, that I had private health insurance, home and contents insurance, insurance with relation to income protection, TPD, and death and disability.
Commissioner, I have a number of other questions about this meeting, if that's a convenient time.
Yes. Can I ask you, please, Ms McKenna, if we can be back in time to begin again at 2?
Thank you.
We'll adjourn until 2. Yes, Ms Orr.
Ms McKenna, I had been asking you some questions about your first meeting with Mr Henderson on the 7th of November 2016. In that meeting, did Mr Henderson ask you if you wanted to invest in shares?
Yes, he did.
And what did you say to that?
I said yes, I'd been considering that I should look at some shares because it would be good to have something liquid rather than having everything tied up in property and superannuation. I said to Mr Henderson, nothing exotic please, no techies or plantations, and if you'd be I'd be pleased to consider any recommendations concerning blue chips if you would like to make some recommendations in that regard. I said that if he'd made those recommendations, I would then run any such recommendations past my brother, given my brother's occupational experience in relation to such matters. I went into what that is, but I won't say it now.
Mm-hmm. And did Mr Henderson also ask you if you were interested in investing in a managed investment fund?
Mr Henderson, after having asked me whether I was interested in shares, said, what about managed funds? Would you be interested in them? And unlike my affirmative response when I'd indicated I would be interested in recommendations concerning blue chips, I said I'd potentially be interested in a managed investment fund. I indicated, Mr Henderson said that Henderson Maxwell, the firm, had some and that they were doing very well and would I be interested in those. And I said, is there any information on your website about how the Henderson Maxwell ones are performing? He said there was no information on the websites, but I would receive a regular email or regular update. Mr. Henderson indicated to me that the Henderson Maxwell managed investments were doing very well. He said that one of the planners had recently won an international investing award, which was even more prestigious than the AFA award. I should interpose, one of the reasons why I'd gone to see Henderson Maxwell was because the firm had been the winner of the AFA Financial Planner of the Year 2016. That is the year that I went to see him. And so after, and I said, yes, I see you have the plaque out there in the waiting room. That was the AFA Planner of the Year award. So after Mr Henderson had said that these matters about the firm having recently won, or one of the planners having recently won an international financial planning award, I said words to the effect, that sounds very impressive. And I said, but obviously I would first want to see some comparative information about different funds. I would want to see a table with Fund X, Fund Y, Fund Z, what the performance and costs and matters of that nature had been over say the past year, past 5 years, the past 10 years. I indicated that I knew the mantra that past performance cannot be an indicator for future performance, but nonetheless I would want to see some comparative information, and certainly before I would consider any Henderson Maxwell fund.
Did Mr Henderson ask you if you would consider establishing a self-managed superannuation fund?
Yes, he did.
And what did you say to that?
No, not at all.
Did Mr Henderson raise the topic of a self-managed superannuation fund again?
Yes. It was to be one of the largest slabs of conversation that we actually had at the meeting. After I'd indicated that I was not interested in a self-managed superannuation fund, Mr Henderson continued to promote the establishment of a self-managed superannuation fund relevantly involving Henderson Maxwell. I said I had no interest in a self-managed superannuation fund because I had no interest in a self-managed superannuation fund. And he said, "We'll look after it for you," or words to that effect, "but we'll look after it for you." I said, "I'm not interested." Mr Henderson persisted in promoting a self-managed superannuation fund with Henderson Maxwell involvement. I can tell you some of the descriptors that he used if you wish me to.
Of course, yes.
I recall that one of the first things that he said was that a self-managed superannuation fund would give you, and I can remember his hands going up saying, control. And then there were matters such as openness, transparency, visibility, online access, and as to the merits of having these arrangements through Henderson Maxwell, he said that there would be the benefit of one-on-one meetings, either with himself or with another planner who I think he may have said at that point was Mr Davison, although I do not remember exactly which name was being used. I said I still wasn't interested. I said I had all the openness and transparency that I wanted from my existing schemes. As to other matters, I said that I liked the high degree of prudential and governmental. I withdraw that. Prudential and governance arrangements that applied through my existing schemes. And that I regularly declined the offer of one-on-one meetings with my existing schemes because I'm quite content to leave those matters to large schemes, which I added had whole departments of people analysing the markets in a way that I just wouldn't have the time or the inclination to. Mr Henderson persisted in promoting a self-managed superannuation fund. I was almost laughing at him at this stage. I said, Sam, I'd probably go bankrupt if I had a self-managed superannuation fund. And then I wouldn't only be bankrupt, but I wouldn't have a job either. And I explained some of the reasons in brief form and in a self-deprecating way, that there are only certain circumstances whereby a statutory office holder can be removed from statutory office, and bankruptcy and breaching some law or other concerning superannuation would fall into those categories. I thought with that would be the end of discussion about setting up a self-managed superannuation fund. Mr Henderson persisted yet again in promoting a self-managed superannuation fund, and the tone turned a bit at this point, and he said, you can buy property in a self-managed superannuation fund, but you can't do that with your existing funds. And I said, I know that. I knew you could buy property within a self-managed superannuation fund, but you could not do within my existing schemes. And then he said, well, would you at least consider one? You know, there are many benefits about having a self-managed superannuation fund. And I was a bit concerned about the tone that I'd responded to with his tone, and I just thought I'll back off a little bit. I'm just here to get advice. And I said to him words to the effect, oh, look, Sam, if there is some secret financial planner's business about having a self-managed superannuation fund, you can put it in your advice and I'll consider what you have to say about it as a potential option. That was he said, good, that was the end of the discussion about self-managed superannuation funds. I was very pleased at the time that that was the end of the discussion about self-managed superannuation funds.
And you had various records with you about your finances in this meeting?
Yes, I had brought along a folder which I had prepared. It was a A4 ring binder, and within that I had tabulated all of my financial information that I thought might potentially be relevant for the purposes of the meeting.
And you offered to leave those records with Mr Henderson?
Yes, I offered him the folder of material either to keep for the duration of the preparation of the advice or alternatively for photocopying.
And Mr Henderson took copies of 2 documents from that folder. They were the annual statements from your 2 superannuation funds.
Yes, they were the only 2 documents that he wished to have copied.
And you've annexed copies of those annual statements that were copied by Mr Henderson to your statement as Exhibits 2 and 3?
That is correct.
And could I ask you to look at Exhibit 2 in particular, which relates to your SAS Deferred Superannuation Fund, WIT 0900 0002 0001.
Yes.
So we see from this document that 2 figures have been redacted on the first page. One of those figures, the top figure, is referred to as an immediate lump sum benefit after debts.
That is correct.
And the other figure that has been redacted relates to a deferred retirement benefit after debts.
That is correct.
And whilst those figures have been redacted, I think you have an unredacted version. And can you see from that that the difference between the immediate lump sum benefit and the deferred retirement benefit is approximately $500,000?
That is correct.
So the immediate lump sum benefit at this date, on the 30th of June 2016, was approximately $500,000 less than the deferred retirement benefit.
That is correct.
And could I ask you to turn to page 0004 in this document so we can see how these benefits worked? Do you see, Ms McKenna, on this page, a reference to your retirement benefit? The immediate lump sum benefit shown is payable to you if you decide to cash out or roll over your benefit before reaching your scheme earliest retirement age. If you access your immediate lump sum before reaching your scheme earliest retirement age, you will forfeit your right to the deferred lump sum benefit.
That is what the text reads.
And do we see from 0002, a couple of pages back, that the scheme earliest retirement age was 58?
That is correct.
So if you accessed your benefit in this scheme before the age of 58, you would forfeit your rights to the entire deferred lump sum benefit?
Yes, the difference between the immediate sum and the deferred benefit sum at least as of that date.
So at this stage, when you went to meet with Mr Henderson, you were a couple of years short of the earliest retirement age, 58.
Yes.
And if you had accessed these benefits at that time, you would have forfeited approximately $500,000.
Just like that?
Yes. Now, this is a document that you said Mr Henderson copied and kept, is that right?
That is correct.
And what did Mr Henderson say to you about when he would be in a position to provide you with financial advice and recommendations for your situation?
Before I was leaving, I withdraw that. Mr Henderson said words to the effect, it's going to take a lot of time to do the research for this advice. It might be the case that the advice won't be ready until the new year. And I can recall being quite pleased about that because it suggested to me that the statement of advice or the advice was going to be properly researched. And I said words to the effect, no problems, or that's fine, Sam. The superannuation changes don't come into effect until 1 July, and I don't expect I'll be buying property between now and the new year.
Mr Henderson gave you a letter of engagement in this meeting, which you signed.
Yes, he did.
And under that letter of engagement, you agreed to pay Henderson Maxwell $4,500 to prepare a statement of advice.
$4,950.
$4,950. You've annexed the letter of engagement to your statement at Exhibit 4.
If you'll just give me a moment to locate that, please.
Yes, I see. It's Exhibit 4, FPA 0011 002 0118. When
Thank
that's
you.
brought
Yes.
up on the screen, we'll see that the plan preparation fee was $4,500 plus GST, which gave rise to a total fee of $4,950.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, this meeting, you've given evidence in your statement, Ms McKenna, was on the 7th of November 2016.
That is correct.
At any time on that day, did you make a phone call to the SAS Superannuation Fund?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
At any time on that day, on the 7th of November 2016, did you make a phone call to the SAS Superannuation Fund?
Oh, no.
And at any time on that day, did you make a phone call to the PSAP Superannuation Fund?
No.
All right. Now, you arranged to meet with Mr Henderson again in this meeting on the 12th of December.
That is correct.
And did you then receive an electronic calendar invitation from Henderson Maxwell inviting you to attend a meeting on that date that was described in the calendar invitation as a statement of advice presentation?
SOA presentation.
An SOA presentation. Did you understand that to mean a statement of advice presentation?
I did.
And you've annexed that calendar invitation to your statement as Exhibit 5?
Yes, that was the first of two, identifying it as a... I should just explain that the meeting was rescheduled, and the further invitation also used a descriptor of SOA presentation.
So the meeting was later changed to the 14th of December rather than the 12th of December?
That's correct.
And on the 14th of December, did you again meet with Mr Henderson?
I did meet with Mr Henderson on the 14th of December.
And you took your son with you to this meeting?
That is correct, as I had on with the first meeting.
And had Mr Henderson prepared a statement of advice for you?
When I went into the meeting, he first of all fiddled with a computer or a laptop for a moment and then projected something onto an overhead screen. I didn't actually have an advice at that stage.
And was the projection on the screen a projection of a statement of advice?
Yes, that's what I came to understand it to be.
And did he also give you a hard copy of the statement of advice in that meeting?
Yes, he did.
And you've annexed a copy of that statement of advice to your statement as Exhibit 6.
Subject to certain provisos, there were Exhibit 6 to my statement doesn't indicate the sign here tags.
Yes. So how was so that is the document that was, it's a copy of the document that was presented to you in that meeting. How did it differ in presentation, physical presentation, from what you have in your statement?
I have the copy of the original statement of advice, and what I could, which I obtained recently from another organisation, and I don't know how best to explain it, but perhaps if it was shown.
Are you demonstrating, Ms McKenna, that there were sign here tabs within the document?
There were, which aren't reflected in the version which is in my
Yes.
evidence before the Commission. And also, in the original statement of advice provided to me by Mr Henderson, there was also there are various tabs in it, and one of the tabs was titled Newsletter, and the 2-page Henderson Maxwell newsletter, which was in the original advice as not for reasons which are later addressed, contained in Annexure 6.
What were the recommendations that Mr Henderson made in the statement of advice, Ms McKenna?
The principal recommendation that was made was that I should establish a self-managed superannuation fund through rolling out my SAS superannuation as the principal source of the establishment of that self-managed superannuation fund. The advice also recommended that I should I go to at this point what the other key planks of the financial advices?
Yes, the key recommendations in the statement of advice. You've mentioned one, which was the establishment of the self-managed superannuation fund with your
money
SAS.
drawn from SAS, rolled out from SAS.
Yes.
The second was that any spare money, well, I can tell you now, he said that I should direct $3,000 a month plus any other spare cash that I had to Henderson Maxwell portfolio. Mr Henderson recommended that to the extent that I held some shares in Medibank, you've mentioned that earlier, that I should make an in-specie transfer of those to Henderson Maxwell. I had a managed account with another organisation. Mr Henderson recommended that I should sell down that account and transfer the money, the funds from the sale of the transfer to Henderson Maxwell. I might interpose to say that that particular investment obviously had not been examined because it was in the nature of a term deposit, which could not, in fact, be sold down at that point of time. So they were the key planks. Superannuation, establishment of a self-managed superannuation fund using my SAS super, which would have resulted in an immediate forfeiture of $500,000. Deposit my cash to Henderson Maxwell, make an in-specie transfer of shares that I held to Henderson Maxwell, sell down another investment that I have, which couldn't be sold, and give the money to Henderson Maxwell. I think they were the key planks of it.
And what was your reaction to those recommendations?
I thought they were risible.
What did you say to Mr Henderson?
Well, in the first instance, when I had been given the statement of advice, I'd had a quick skim read of it when I went home, and I can remember saying to my son words to the effect, "I can't believe this. I've been to see the financial planner of the year and this is what you get." I said to my son, I thought that if I went to an independently owned financial planning firm, that I wouldn't be subjected to product flogging of the type associated with the big banks, and yet all I'm being flogged is Henderson Maxwell's own products and services. My initial skim reading of the statement of advice suggested that it was so poor, the advice was so poor, that I all but threw the advice in the bin at that stage. In any event,
Could I ask you just to
Yes.
pause there, Ms McKenna, because I want to understand firstly what you said to Mr Henderson in the meeting we can move to the
Oh,
events
I beg your
after
pardon.
the
Oh, I'm sorry.
meeting.
I'm confusing one with the other.
Yes, so
What-
having formed an immediate reaction, which you described, to the advice recommendations, what did you say in the meeting to Mr Henderson about those recommendations?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. We are on a different timeline here. It was after I had initially been provided with the advice that was my initial reaction, that I didn't think much of it. But I didn't look at it closely. I just put it away. On the eve of when I was next supposed to go back to see Mr. Henderson
We'll come to that. I just want to finish discussing the meeting. Was there any discussion between you or your son with Mr Henderson about the statement of advice in the meeting?
Oh, at the second meeting.
Yes.
I beg your pardon. At this yes. After Mr Henderson had got the overhead projection working, he said to me words to the effect, we've had a good look at this and we've recommended you should set up a self-managed superannuation fund, and that you buy property using a limited recourse loan, and that you should have Henderson Maxwell Investments will be looking after it for you.
And did you or your son say anything to Mr Henderson about that?
I said, why would I do that? Putting aside everything else, I would be most concerned about all of the fees and, I'd be most concerned about setting up a self-managed superannuation fund, and Mr Henderson said they only cost about $4,000 to set up. And I said, oh, there'd be your fees and other costs. And Mr Henderson said words to the effect of, look, I can see what, I'm sorry, I've missed out a bit. I said, why would I do that when I'm in secure, low-cost industry type funds? And that's when he said they only cost about $4,000 to set up, as best I recall. And then Mr Henderson said, look, I don't have much time. I've got a Christmas cocktail reception that I've got to go to. I'm sorry about this. I have to go.
And how long did this meeting last?
10 to 15 minutes. There was some further discussion later about other matters.
Did you arrange in this meeting to meet again in January?
Yes, but yes, we did.
And prior to that January meeting, you've already said you reviewed the statement of advice. You took a copy away with you from that meeting.
I beg your pardon, and we were on a different timeline.
And I think you had given evidence about your reaction once you read the statement of advice carefully.
No, I skim read it after I received it that same day.
And did you read it carefully before the January meeting?
I did. On the eve of the meeting, I decided to have a better look at it on. It would have been the 9th, on the night of the 9th, and then going into the morning of the 10th of January 2017.
Did you send an email to Henderson Maxwell containing some comments about the statement of advice prior to the meeting, articulating your concerns about the statement of advice, including the fact that implementation of the advice would cause you to immediately lose about $500,000?
Yes, I did.
And you've annexed as Exhibit 7 to your statement the email that you sent, and as Exhibit 8 the comments to the statement of advice that you sent to Mr Henderson.
Yes. 7 is the covering email, and 8 is the annotated copy of the statement of advice. It was very rough and ready. I was doing it into the wee small hours of the morning.
And did you then meet with Mr Henderson on the scheduled date of 10 January 2017?
Yes, we did.
And did Mr Henderson indicate that he'd received your comments about the statement of advice?
Yes.
And what was his response to your comments?
Well, the conversation unfolded something like this. After we'd said hello, Mr Henderson said, I've got to say this up front, there's no way around it. You're absolutely right about most of what you've said. I said, how can this be? I came to you to seek advice about what should be done before 1 July and what should be done with the AMP loan. Mr Henderson's voice sort of trailed away and he said, oh yes, the AMP loan. I said, if I had followed your advice, I would have lost $500,000 in superannuation. Oh, I came away with advice that I should set up a self-managed superannuation fund. If I'd followed your advice, I would have lost $500,000. You're supposed to be the expert. I don't profess to be an expert in superannuation and retirement planning or words to that effect. I said, but even I can read what's written in a member's statement. So I said, how could this have happened? Mr Henderson said, it was the paraplanners. I should interpose to say I didn't know what paraplanners were. I thought they might be akin to paralegals. I said, what are paraplanners? And he said, Mr Henderson said, they do the preliminary research for the advice. I said, who are the paraplanners for my advice? And he named 2 persons. And Mr Henderson said, look, it's only a draft. Remember I'd mentioned something about this at the last meeting when your son had raised a query about the amount recorded as superannuation. And I said to him, this isn't a draft. And I was touching the sign here, tags, with my fingers. Mr Henderson said, well, Donna, what do you want to do? And I said, Sam, well, what do you propose? And there was a bit of a delay. And then in an upbeat tone, he said to me, we can do it all when you turn 58. I've checked with your superannuation fund today. And I said, let me get this straight, just so I'm not misunderstanding anything here. If I had, the effect of your advice is that 1, I should set up a self-managed superannuation fund and direct my super to it, to be run by Henderson Maxwell. 2, I should sell my shares or transfer them to you and give any other cash that I have to Henderson Maxwell. And he said, yes, once we get a better handle on the cash flow. And I said, so you're saying I should essentially give all my money to Henderson Maxwell? And it was so disarming. He said, yes. And Mr Henderson, there was just a silence. I was gobsmacked. It was so disarming. He said, I've got another client, a single woman, a bit like you, Donna. And he said, she's got about $6 million with us, and she's happy, very happy, with how things are going with us. I should interpose to say I don't have anything approaching that. And I said, really? in a sort of a, well, good for you and your other sort of client kind of tone. And why would I trust my money with Henderson Maxwell? And Mr. Henderson just didn't seem to be, to me, to be understanding matters. And
Did Mr. Henderson offer to make a refund of the fees that you had paid for the
he did.
advice?
After he'd told me this happy news about himself and the other client, and I'd commented words to the effect, well, why would I trust Henderson Maxwell with my money? I would have lost $500,000 if I'd used Henderson Maxwell, and that would have been just for starters. He said, I'm prepared to offer you a full refund. What's your BSB number? I'll arrange to have the effect of it was immediate payment. I said, I'll consider that, put it in writing. And Mr. Henderson said words to the effect, what's there to consider? I'm offering you a refund. And I said, I'm a lawyer, we like things in writing. Mr. Henderson then said, oh, all right, I'll put it in writing, but it will be short, very short. And I said, short is fine, I just want it confirmed in writing.
And after you left that meeting, did you receive within a short time an email from Mr. Henderson offering you that full refund?
Yes, the email was time-coded at 4:27 p.m.
So later that day?
No, within minutes of leaving the meeting.
On the same day?
On that same day.
Thank you. And at any time on that day, the 10th of January 2017, did you make a phone call to your SAS superannuation fund?
No.
And approximately a week later, did you make a written complaint to Henderson Maxwell?
I made the written complaint on the 17th of January 2017, I believe.
And did you subsequently provide Henderson Maxwell with bank details for the purpose of a refund of your fees?
I did.
And did you receive a written response from Mr. Henderson in response to your complaint?
I did. I believe that was received on the 7th of February.
And Mr. Henderson apologised for the advice that he'd provided in that letter to you?
Among other matters.
And he described the advice that you had received as clearly templated, rushed, inaccurate and imperfect?
He did.
And he referred to the fact that he'd now provided you with a refund for the advice fee?
Yes.
Did his response to your complaint also include a reference to your entitlement to take the matter to the Financial Ombudsman Service or to an industry body like the Financial Planning Association?
It did.
And did you subsequently make a complaint to the Financial Planning Association?
I did.
And you've annexed the written complaint that you made to your statement. And in the course of making that complaint, did you provide the FPA with a draft briefing note explaining what had occurred?
The briefing note occurred much later.
And did you make a formal witness statement to the FPA about these events?
I did on the 29th of September, I believe.
And were you told that Mr. Henderson had made a written response to the FPA?
I was at some point.
And did you ask to see a copy of that response?
I did.
Were you permitted to see a copy of that response?
No, I was not.
Have you today seen a copy of that response?
No, I haven't.
Were you told in the course of the FPA's investigation that the matter had been referred to their Conduct Review Commission?
I was.
And were you subsequently told that the matter had been set down for a hearing?
I was.
Were you given an opportunity to participate in the process of the Conduct Review Commission?
None at all.
And in February 2018, having made your complaint to the FPA in March 2017, were you given some information about the status of your complaint?
Could you refresh my memory about what? No, could you re-ask the question as to what date that was, please?
In February of this year, Ms. McKenna, having made your complaint almost a year earlier, in March 2017, were you given some information by the FPA about the status of your complaint?
Yes, I was.
What were you told?
I was told that, in effect, discussions were underway, and that discussions had been commenced in December, and that by then, February 2018, it appeared that those discussions were quite fruitful and that the parties were close to reaching a resolution in relation to the matter, among other matters.
In connection with your complaint to the FPA, did you seek audio recordings of telephone calls that were made to your 2 superannuation funds about your superannuation accounts?
I made one application, however, that application resulted in audio recordings from each of the 2 different funds.
Did you received those audio recordings? Did you receive the
I
audio
did.
recordings in response to your request?
I did.
And have you listened to those audio recordings?
I have.
And do you know between November 2016 and January 2017 approximately how many calls were made to the SAS and PSAP funds about your superannuation accounts?
6, I believe, half a dozen or so.
And how many of those calls did you make?
None of them.
And I have one final question, Ms McKenna. Why have you decided to tell this story to the Royal Commission?
If I could just preface that by saying I hold a statutory office, and I'm a semi-public person in that sense. And what has been set out in my material discloses a lot about my private life and matters of that nature, which I would rather not have had aired. However, I considered it was my public duty to provide assistance to the Royal Commission in relation to the particular circumstances that I have encountered in relation to the financial advice that I received, and then my unhappy experiences also with the FPA. If I could say this, if someone with my educational and occupational background hits a wall when you endeavour to engage proper disciplinary processes, what hope would someone who does not have those type of occupational background and skills, what hope are other people going to have? It seems that it is going to take a Royal Commission so that I can find out what happened to my complaint before the FPA.
Thank you, Ms McKenna. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Ms Orr. Apart from you, Mr Woods, for Henderson Maxwell, does any other party seek leave to examine Ms McKenna? No? Mr Woods?
I don't have any questions either.
Yes. Ms Orr? Ms McKenna, thank you for your evidence. You may step down. You're excused.
Thank you. If you just give me a moment to gather my materials together.
Thank you very much.